This morning, we're very lucky to have Lynn Hales. Lynn is a longtime Arbortext user. If you've spent any time at all in the Arbortext community spaces, you've seen Lynn, probably with a camera around his neck if you met him at a conference. Lynn is well-known, well-respected, and a familiar voice to us all. Today, he's going to explain some of the basic authoring automation tricks that those in the know employ to make the world better for their users. Now I'll turn the presentation over to today's shop coach, Lynn Hales. Lynn, it's all yours.
Oh, well, thank you much. Greetings, everybody. Okay, I guess I'll click the little button that says Show My Screen, and we'll start up. What we're going to do is kind of pick up this week from where Brandon left off last week, and we're going to show a little bit of ability of how to customize Epic with ACL. Now, you can customize Epic with XUI and JavaScript and so forth, but if you're not familiar with them or you just want to use some of the functionality that's built into Epic, ACL is a really good tool to do. It's what I really learned with back 10, 15 years ago when I got started in this stuff. This is your basic Epic Arbortext window right out of the box by double-clicking on the .exe. And one of the main things that I have done when I did my customization is when you see this, the new file, I'm not going to show this any longer. Epic, when I started, did not allow you to modify this new file window or to modify it with a very difficult process. Although it's a lot easier now, and the customizations are a lot easier with the customization folders that are built in. But most of what I'm going to show today, what I am showing is something I had done prior to that kind of stuff, but I've just never gone back and upgraded it. So I'm going to close this window down, and I'm going down to my shortcut over here, if I can find it on this particular computer, and we'll open up Epic. And you'll notice that I start up with a pop-up window. And I will show the code for this a little bit later. But you'll notice we've got a series of different buttons. One of them is an Epic default. I work with the Army, and I write mil specs for a living for the DoD. So I've got some different things that I have put in here. And let's just pick 40051C, click OK, and this one is one of the things I just put in as a feature because sometimes I don't want my autosave turned on. Some of the work I was doing, I was working with real people, other people's real data. I didn't want to save changes that I made and trying to find out what the problem was. So anyway, that's a customization I tossed in. The big change that you'll see is, like right here, is my new file menu. I can go down and pick any selection file that I want. And I'm not going to run through this all, but this just gives you an idea of some of the things you can do with ACL, really simple ACL, to customize your screen. So one of the things I'd like to start with before we go into any of the really scripting we're going to be talking about is pick up on some of the commands that you can deal with that either are documented. A couple of them really aren't documented. One of them is if you ever need to see your specific environmental variable that Windows may have, you can actually go look at your specific variable, or you can set it as a variable in the scripting language just by using this particular command. And we'll go ahead and we'll just use, I don't want to do that one, so I'm going to use that later. $T equal, and we'll use $name, :, TMV. And this right here as capitals is very important because it doesn't work in lowercase. And I have a Windows environment variable I set called Epic Start. And we'll set that. Now we'll do the eval that Brandon showed us last week. Okay. The other day we had this same problem, so let's go back and I forgot one thing here. I mentioned capitalization is important. Capitalization is important. And that's my environment variable. I use this routinely. I networked all of my stuff out to a network access server about a year ago, so that's my network access now. Another one that we had, Brandon showed us the response command last week. Where we just go up and you get a window, we get the OK button. Well, this is nice if you're in the middle of something, you want to acknowledge the fact that it's happened. But you can actually use the response command as a way of entering data. If I go back in and I say some variable, and then after that we add what would be our comment up there. We add a comma. And the variables, the values we want to see. Now we have multiple buttons. And what happens is if I click yes, and then we go down and evaluate the variable we just put in, you'll see it comes up as number 1. Now you can use that value. With response, the values are going to be numeric. And it'll start with 1 and will increment up for the number of buttons that you put in there. And you can put probably as many as you want to try to put in there. I don't think there's a limit that I've ever discovered. I think I've only gone with like 3 or 4 buttons though. But you can use those button values. Now you saw when I opened up the my customization that I had choices. Well, the choice method of doing this is with a command called readbar. And if anybody's got Epic Help, they can use 9053 as the help number for that. But if you type in something like readbar, and you can put a title of what you want it to be. Sorry about that one. Use the prompt command, sub-portion of it. And what I want to be doing a little bit later is working with establishing an automatic ID generation tool. It's very basic, but it'll give you an idea of what you can do with it. And this last piece down here is our variable we're going to be dealing with. So, if we go back down and do an eval of we have the text that we're inputting. So you can do that. And in a minute, like I said, I'll go back and show you how to do the radial buttons that you can choose. But what I'd like to do now is just go in and show you how this real simple little script that I worked up over the week works out to generate an ID. So I'm going back to test that the file that we used last week that Brandon put together real quick showed a .width file, and I just basically took the same thing and built it up a little bit. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go down and I'm going to source my test file, and I'll bring that up in just a second as well. And this is just showing that the script is running, and I put a little bit of extra stuff into it. I have it go through the first time and just count through to see if there's any attributes that are set, and then I set a value to allow me to do something later on, which will explain. But right now, what I'm doing, I'm going to show a different method of doing this. There's 2 ways you can probably enter information. What I was going to do with this one is I'm going to be grabbing, I'm not going to bring up the script. And the first thing I did was I set up a couple of functions. One was to count the IDs, and that was that first response that we got right here, which said that it had done it. It had gone through and counted the number of IDs that had already been set. Because typically, in a real script, you don't want to overwrite the IDs that you already have in existence, because you might have an ID rep that's pointing to it, and you lose that link someplace. So you can take this and add some more customization to it to ensure you don't overwrite existing IDs. It's just going to fill the ID that's there eventually, though. The second function is the one that's going to add the ID. And what I have done here is I'm going down and I'm looking for the first OID, which is book. I'm setting a couple of counters, and what I'm doing is I'm establishing this value right here of ID base variable of the value of an attribute, the OID attribute 0 of ID. And if there's anything there, it'll take that value and use that later. If not, it goes down and tells me I need to go in and modify that attribute so I've got something to work with. So if I go back down here to this, we click OK. It opens up the Modify Attributes panel. It also moves my cursor up to the very first value. And remember, with an ID, you cannot have any spaces. So one of the first things I thought about was like capturing something unique, was like maybe the title of the book. Well, the title is going to have spaces in it, and I didn't feel like writing up the script that would take out all the spaces. So, but if you want to do that, that's something you can do. So now if we go back down here, and the file's already been sourced, all we've got to do is type in the package name, which I have named Toolkit, and add ID down in the command line. And it's gone through now because there was a value up here in book. And we've added 21 IDs to each element in this document that has an ID. And it's rather simple. So it gets an idea of some of the things you can do with your very simple customizations. So just kind of running through this script as we did it right here. Like I said, the first portion of it, this function count, just counted IDs. And the reason I did this is, like this, if you go back later, we want to run this script a second time. What I went through this time, I just incremented and added everything. But if I ran the entire file, it finds that there's 21 IDs already set. And notice now that I started incrementing at 22 instead of the 21. So you could actually go through, if you ever have to add something in later, it would do the count for you. It gives you the counter value to go in for a later ID, so you don't duplicate an ID in a document. Okay. So like I said, this is the script that did this. This little block there is commented out. We're going to uncomment in just a second. I'm going to kind of just delete this out real fast. Uncomment these two values. Notice I've gone back and I've got the basic file with nothing in it. We'll show you how to do this same script now using the read bar command. Okay, did the count. Now we'll put in a value. The entered value goes up here, and this is now part of the ID. So every ID has some common source and an incremented number. Bringing that down, going back to the actual script so we can run through it. The read bar, we had the prompt. It sets the ID. This if statement right here goes back up to the count. This is what allows me to start incrementing at a higher value if we've already got IDs established. Then we go through and we do a while. The OID is valid. Then we look and see if the tag has an attribute named with an OID of the name of the OID O is equal to 1. We start counting. We go in, we modify the attribute of ID by adding the ID base, my variable from right here. and the count value from right here. And the reason I have a second counter is this little response I put up here that told me how many IDs we have. This just counts the number of times we work. If I had just used this count, this could be off because if we have gone through and counted previously existing IDs, we're counting those as well. I didn't want to do that. At the very end, what we have here is the source to run the actual script of starting out with count IDs. And count IDs, when it runs, then runs the add-in script as a follow-on. You can start an ACL script one of two ways. You can run it like this through the actual ACL script, or you can call the script through the command line by just calling either the package name with the script, and it will go through and run from there as well. Hopefully I don't have everybody totally confused right now, but ACL does have some really nice other functions within it that allows you to do a lot of other things with it. I mean, it will do things like callbacks, hooks, and I just don't have the time to go into that kind of stuff in a 25-minute session. But this just gives you an idea of some of the capability that is out there. And what I want to do now, like I told you, I promised I would show you the other script. This is my startup script where I have my prompt that gives me the buttons. By choosing prompt and choice, and let's go down here. That was help 9053. We'll open up the Arbortext online help at the Help Center. And this is all the different choices that you can put into the read bar command to make it work and get different variations. The big thing here is when you take the choice command, the choice option, these are values that are being set to be evaluated in different if statements. Spacing is critical. Then they're done that one. And at the very end back here, again, we show the type. When I wanted to do extra lines, you just use the / key to toss in additional extra lines to give it the line breakage that you need to have if you want to do it that way. And then your if statement, you just go back in and you can do whatever command series you need to do.
Excellent.
And one other thing here that we've, just while I'm thinking about it, because one of the scripts I did have will do it. If you've so far, whenever we've done like an eval of a it just comes up into the message window, and it overwrites anything that's already there. If you want to make sure, if you want to have that value come up and append to the window, use the output the string equal the greater than sign and the star, and we just pick it up. And so you can actually bring a bunch of you can go through something of identify maybe error messages you're catching or something like that, or changes you're making, and put them out into a message window to see what was changed. Or you can actually send it out to an external file. So that's about 20 minutes or so. Does anybody have any questions so far, Liz?
Well, we don't have any questions yet. We'll give them a couple of minutes to type them in if they want to. In the meantime, that was great. A lot of good, very good tips. That the output, adding output to the window is really key because you don't want to always overwrite it. And this is fabulous stuff. You could keep giving all kinds of little tips in there. I couldn't name them all. Every time I turned around, though, you had another one. So let me, while folks are typing, let me remind everyone of the resources available to folks in the Arbortext community. Ours is a large and very active community. Over the years, things have changed, and we found a lot of people don't know about all the resources available. This chart here is a list that we maintain. It's only a sampling of the resources available. The full list is, you can go find it at the URL at the bottom of the screen. There are mailing lists, there's news groups, there's a code repository, and Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Squidoo, all kinds of places, and videos on YouTube. All right, so let's see. I think I still don't see any questions. You must have done a really good job comparing it, setting up with Brandon last week and filling in today. So I think we'll see everybody next week. Next week, we're going to show menu and key customizations in Editor to make the world a better place for our users. Thanks, Lynn.
Not a problem.
Well
Everybody
done.
have a good one. Enjoy Friday the 13th.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, everyone.